I've just received this package in the mail, so let's open it up and see what's inside. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Well, I've just been sent this by Svbony for review, and is the SV241pro, so the bigger unit compared to the smaller one, which has sort of goes by the same number basically, SV241 as well, but it's not controllable through Nina, whereas this one is. Now I've got the smaller unit on my ASCAR setup, and it's ideal for that because I don't really need control over it through Nina. I will be using it more in a situation where I'll be taking the little unit out onto the deck or wherever to image, and I will be monitoring it all the time. It's not necessarily the kind of thing that I'll be wanting for it to sort of shut down by itself. I'll be doing that myself. But this, I think, will be more ideal for the observatory, and to replace one of the Pegasus Powerbox Advances I've got, which is starting to show some age. I think I've got one USB port not working, and the other day I had an issue where I wasn't getting enough power from one of the power outputs to the 2600mm Pro, so it wasn't able to cool down. At first I thought it was a problem with the camera, but when I switched it to a power output on the Powerbox Advance, it worked perfectly fine. So I think this has arrived at an ideal time to replace that Pegasus Powerbox Advance. Anyway, we'll open it up and have a look inside. So there we go, that's what it looks like when you receive it. So we have a hex screw here, a hex spanner here, which is used for the little hex screws or bolts to secure this to the bottom of the unit. And this is very similar to the type of thing that you get with the ASA Air. And so, you know, be very familiar with that. Comes with some little hex bolts here for connecting it to the unit, and this is the main unit here, obviously a lot bigger than the smaller one, more USB outputs, more power outputs. We've also got outputs here for the straps, a couple of places for the probes that come with it, power at the back here, and a USB 3 which will connect down to your computer, but we'll go over this more fully in a moment. Underneath this are the sort of cables that come with it. We've got the instructions, and here instruction pamphlet, which has got very small writing, so I have to get my glasses out to have a read of it, or I can look on the website and see what the story is there. This is the power connection here, which is one of these cigarette lighter ones. I won't be using this, I'll just use the power cable that's going to the Pegasus Powerbox Advance that I'm replacing. We've got a series of power cables to connect to different units. USB 3 cable here, which is where I'll be connecting this from the Powerbox down to the computer, probably via the mount, because I'm using the Uptron CM120, which has lots of connections into the satellite, etc. And we've got another power cable here, and then there are two probe type connections here. One I think is to be used for monitoring the temperature of your dew strap, and the other one is to monitor the outside temperature and the humidity. I'll have to look those up and see which is which. You can see that they are slightly different. This one's a lot smaller and that one's a lot longer. I'll see which is which, because there are two positions where you can plug these things into the box, the power box, and I need to work out which is which. So let's have a look into this unit further. So the unit comes with a lot of safety protection features like electrostatic protection, overcurrent protection, as well as undercurrent protection, short circuit protection, etc. Because you don't want any power surges going through to your other devices and damaging them. Also, you don't want to lose this device due to power issues. You can see here the overcurrent protection is at 15 amps, over voltage protection 15 volts, and under voltage protection at 9.5 volts. So So these are your power outputs. There is one always on output, and there are 5 others which are switchable. My understanding is you can individually control them, but we'll have a look at that more closely once I get this all set up and connected with Nina. So this is your connection type, your DC 5.5 by 2.1, which we're very familiar with and goes with the cables that you're provided with. And there's 12 volt and 6 amp output. So this is the power input here, this type of connection that you want to use, and it's 12 volt, 10 amp maximum. You don't want to exceed that. Obviously there is the overcurrent and the overvoltage protection, but definitely don't go over this, just leave it at this. This will be plenty of power to go out to all your devices. You won't need to exceed that at all. So that's what you're going to be using. I do have a connection out in the observatory that is exactly this, so it should be fine. When it comes to the USB side of things, you do have a Type-C USB connection. It's actually a 2.0 interface, not a 3.0, and you've got 5 volt 2.5 amp maximum power output coming through this Type-C USB port. The other USB ports are your typical Type A connections. We've got 3 USB 2 connections and 2 USB 3 connections. My understanding is that these 3 here are controllable as a group, and these 3 are controllable as a group. So there's not individual control over the USB ports, but you can switch on and off this group and then this group if required when you've got your gear connected. And that is useful. I do have that sort of situation because I'm using the rig in Spain. I do find that occasionally with something like the mount or whatever, even though I can turn the power on and off, it doesn't seem to change the problem I'm having with the connection. And if I can turn the USB port on and off, that does seem to solve things. So having controllable or switchable USB ports, I think, is a great benefit on this unit, particularly if you're using it in the remote sort of situation. And all the USB outputs, including these Type A ones, do data transfer and power delivery. So here we've got a couple of RCA type outputs, and these are for your heat strips. It says here that they're automatically controlled heating belts based on the environmental data, which is obviously related to your temperature and humidity readings. My understanding is that the port number 1 is controlled automatically, whereas number 2 you have to control manually. So you can put in the power levels, and this number 1 will switch on and off depending on what readings it's getting from the temperature and humidity sensor here and this temperature sensor, which is under your heat strip. But my understanding is number 2 you have to do manually. You put in a figure and it won't vary depending on the environmental conditions. They're both capable of 12 volts and 6 amp output. And over here we have the 2 places you plug in those 2 probes. So the shorter probe over here, which is this one, that collects ambient temperature and humidity data, and then it can calculate the dew point and then control the heating automatically. But my understanding is it's only this number 1 RCA output. Number 2 you do manually. Over here, this probe, which is the long of the 2, is to monitor the temperature of your heating strip. And as far as I know, when the temperature of the heating strip is greater than 5 degrees away from the calculated dew point, then it won't be turned on. But if they get within 5 degrees of each other, then it'll turn on this one over here and heat the dew strip up. How that's going to work here in my situation, where we get a heck of a lot of moisture and condensation all throughout the year, I'm not sure, but we'll see how that goes when we try it out. Okay, so that's a run through on all the various input and output connections on the device. The next thing is to get it into the observatory, swap out the Pegasus Powerbox Advanced, which is having the issues, and connect everything up to this. I haven't decided exactly where to connect it yet, whether I just put it exactly where the Powerbox Advanced was and attach it to the top Losmandy plate of the Skywatcher, or whether to use a little bracket that came with it screw that onto the bottom here and put it onto the telescope where there is a place where you can put one of those brackets, like with a guide scope, for example. And then we'll get Nina up and running and load in whatever drivers, etc. are required for this and see how it's going to work in the observatory situation and go more fully through what we can and can't control on this through Nina. Right, so I have the power box from Svbony attached here, just with some sticky Velcro and with one cable tie. I moved it a bit further down the Losmandy plate than where the Pegasus Powerbox Advanced was positioned, which was a bit further up. That's brought things a little bit closer to all the other equipment, which means I've been able to shorten some of the USB cables, so that's working quite well. Now, I don't have everything plugged into the USB ports on this power box. Largely that's due to the fact that I'm using a rotator here, and because I've got an off-axis guider pointing down there and I've got this filter wheel up here, I am trying to not have things that could potentially get wrapped around here as it rotates. So as a result, the USB connection from the filter wheel and also from the guide camera are going directly to the ASI 2600pro's USB hub. But up here I do have the USB connection obviously for the ASI 2600, also the USB connection for the rotator and for the Pegasus focus cube over here as well. Up on the top I have power connections going in, so one of them is going to the focus cube, the other one is going to the camera, and the last one is going to the rotator. So that's all connected up. Now I've got the USB 3 cable coming out of the power box here, going down. Normally that would go to your computer, your mini PC or your laptop or whatever, but I'm using the cable management system of this Ioptron mount, which is a really good cable system, so I can minimize what cables are going to the ground and therefore unlikely to get caught up as the telescopes rotate. So I'm just using this going straight down into one of the mount USB 3 ports, and that will go on down to the computer. And then for the power, because again I'm not doing a direct connection from a power unit, I'm again using the cable management system in this Ioptron mount. So as a result, what I've done is I've got one of my 2.1 cables, and I've got an adapter here that goes from 2.1 to 2.5, which then can connect into and provide power to the power box here. And you can see the two lights glowing. This is the 12 volt and the 5 volt. So on this side we've got the two RCA outputs here, which are going to the heat strips, and I've got two on here just because one of them is not very good. And then over here are where the two probes get plugged in. Now this one here, which is doing temperature and humidity, that's just sitting up there like that. And the one under here, over here, that's supposed to do just the temperature of the heating strip. If I just move over here, I've just got it sitting basically in here. So it's supposed to monitor the temperature of the heat strip and then calculate whether it should be turning on or not, depending on what your dew point is. All right, so we're logged into the computer in the observatory, and I've gone to the website for Svbony, and I've gone to the page that actually has the little power box thing here, and I'm just going to run down to related documents, and this is where I can find drivers and things. So I'm just going to download, it wants my email address. And then there's the Hub Control Manager. I'll grab that as well. And then there seems to be a firmware package and flashing tool, so I'll grab that also. So it seems that these links get sent to your email address. So from there, I'm going to have to download them. Okay, so those are all downloaded. So what I'm going to do, this one seems to have come down twice for some reason, but anyway, we're going to load up the ESCOM driver first. It's a zip file, so I'm going to have to extract that, I think. Extract all. Yep. And we'll go into that and we'll just run it and get it installed. Now it's come up with this thing about protection by Windows, you just click on more info and then you get the option to run anyway. So I'll click on that. Okay, that seems to be done. Hit finish. And we're going to close that one, and then we're going to go to, come back to here, going to go to the Hub Control Manager. Okay, I need .NET desktop runtime to run the application, which I don't seem to have on this Intel NUC because it is a replacement for the other system that broke down. So I'm just going to download it now. All right, so I've downloaded that software from Microsoft, and now we're just going to run the serial control app. And there it is there. So this, I guess, is where you can control things if you're not going to do it through Nina. So we'll just, we might just shut this down for the minute because I'm going to be using Nina, but I was just interested to see what this was. And the last thing is where we go back to downloads. The last thing is the firmware package and flashing tool. So we'll do that. I mean, I probably don't need to run this immediately, but I guess this is, okay, a language that I am not used to, but this will be for looking up the ports, I guess. Anyway, we'll shut this down for the moment, and then we'll start up Nina and see what's going on in there. All right, so for a couple of nights I have been imaging, and I've used the SV241pro for both nights. Rather than show you the videos that I recorded of me bumbling through, I thought I'd just go through a bit more quickly on how I set it up, and some of the things that I went through that it's probably worth you knowing about, so that if you're setting this up for the first time, you might avoid a couple of the problems that I had. So I've actually connected everything up in the observatory. Clearly, it's raining actually now, and I'm not going to be imaging tonight, but I thought I would just have everything running just so I can show you the setup. So when you are attaching your switch, you'll go over here to the switch, and once you've downloaded all the drivers and everything, you might have no switch put there initially, and when you click down there, you'll see this ASCOM driver for Svbony switch. Mine was set on the Pegasus Astro switch, and I just went down to this one and clicked on there. And you would normally go into here, click in here, and you'll see that these are all blank. And what you want to do is you want to put in your various devices in here so that you know that when you connect it and go into the screen in Nina, you can actually see what is connected to what. So I'm just going to quickly type those in now. All right, so I have the focuser attached to the power output 1, the rotator to output 2, the ASI 2600 to output 3, and then 4 and 5 are not being used. In this group of USB ports, which includes the USB-C port, I have the focuser attached to output USB 1 and the rotator to USB 2. If I was going to put something else to the C port, I would probably put a C on the end. And in this group here, 3 to 5, I've just attached the camera to port 4. And for the heat strips, I've just given them the name heat strip 1 and heat strip 2. So I click OK, and then when I connect it, you'll now see that these are filled in. So, port 1, focuser, rotator, 2600mm Pro, as I said, and then the USB groups, focuser 1, rotator on 2, and the camera on 4. And the heat strip 1 and heat strip 2. There's no labels for these ones here, 4 and 5, because I don't have anything attached. Now, you'll see at the top here it says the power, the wattage is 31 watts. You're allowed a maximum of 120 watts because it's 12 volt 10 amp total. And then the voltage here, this kind of varies quite a bit. It's often sort of around 11.5, goes to just over 12. Hopefully that's okay. The ambient temperature is 24 degrees in the observatory because the roof is on and it's not open to the air at the moment. The humidity is reasonably high at 74.8. And the dew point is 19.24. Now the lens temperature here is 25.2 degrees, and what that means is that it's the temperature effectively of the heat strip which is wrapped around the front of the telescope and therefore keeping the front lens from fogging up. Now, if we come down and have a look at the heat strips, we've got heat strip 1, heat strip 2. If you look here, it says automatic control output on number 1, the RCA number 1 output. The RCA number 2 output is manual control only. So from what I can tell from this, only this one is going to be switching on and off depending on the difference between your lens temperature, or basically the heat strip wrapped around the front of the telescope, and whatever the dew point temperature is calculated at. Heat strip 2, you'll have to put in a number yourself, and it says 0 to 253, the level. Although it talks about a warming rate here, I think this is a power level. So 0 would be no heating, 253 would be maximum power. If I was to put in a mid-range of 150, and then I want that to kick in, I just click that like this, and then that will kick in and the heat strip should start warming up. I know this one doesn't work very well, so it's not going to do a lot. Over here is where the automatic thing is going to be going on. So if you think you get a lot of condensation, etc., like I would want it to go to maximum. So I put 253, and if I click tick here, we'll wait and see, but this will stay at 0. I'll probably get an error down here, like a timeout. That will kick in a second. There it is there. I'll just get rid of that. Basically, the reason why that isn't changing is because the difference between this lens temperature reading from that probe and what it's calculating the dew point to be is greater than 5 degrees, so it's not going to turn on. If it was less than 5 degrees difference, this would suddenly jump on and the heat strip would start heating up. And depending on what level I put in here between 0 and 253 will depend on how warm it'll get. So that is my understanding of how these work as far as the automatic control is. How well it works for me, I don't know in our climate here, because we get a huge amount of condensation. And I just hope that it's going to be good enough at turning on and off to make sure that the lens does not fog up. I'm a little concerned that the front probe might warm up nicely and then just sit snug under the heat strip as it's turned off, while this ambient temperature drops and it's got a high dew point, and the next thing I end up condensation before this gets cool enough. But we'll see how that works. Now, one other thing I should mention, when I first connected this up, and it's apparently quite a common problem, you'll find you're going to have really wacky readings. I mean, I guess it depends on what version you get. If you get a unit that's had the latest firmware upgrade, I'll just click away this error message. If you've had the firmware upgrade, then you'll probably get correct readings, but mine didn't have the latest firmware, and so my ambient temperature was some weird thing like 380 degrees, and the ambient humidity was, it looked like something like 350,000 or something. So these were all completely out of whack. I think this was minus 100 and something, which I thought was a little bit odd. And I did a bit of reading on the internet, and I found out that you need to do a firmware upgrade and then it corrects that. So what I suggest that you do, I mean, I guess you could check what value you get. If these are all correct, then I wouldn't worry, you're probably fine. But if you're getting wacky readings, go to the piece of software that you downloaded, which is called the firmware package and flashing tool. Click into that, a loader, and go to this main. Just wait for it to pop up, and this will pop up now. Obviously this is not in English, it looks like it's in Mandarin. Well, it does say USB, so you get a bit of a clue here that this is probably where you choose your USB port. Here are all the ports, and I know that the switch is connected to this one, which is COM port 11. It's slightly off the screen, but anyway, just click on that, and then I kind of guessed that this meant update, so I just clicked on that, and then in here, I won't do it now because I've already updated it, but you'll see the whole update process occur. And that should solve the problem. And then you'll need to I think disconnect or restart this this unit, and then you'll have the new firmware and it should start working correctly. Now that did happen for me here. These were working correctly, but after the firmware upgrade, I had something a bit strange going on with the voltage and the power, and I'll show you a screenshot now. So this is what I was getting, and I thought, oh, this is good. It's the ambient temperature, 15 degrees. I had the roof off, and The dew point at the time was 12.7 degrees. The lens temperature was 18.5. The ambient humidity was 82.4%. So I thought, oh, this is fine, working away. And everything, these were all connected. The camera was cooled down correctly. The focuser was working. The rotator wasn't doing anything, but the heat straps were working. And then I noticed up here it said my voltage was 1.56, which was clearly wrong because it's got an under voltage protection and it should have shut off. And also, why would it be running at 1.56? And the power wattage was 0, even though everything was running fine. The camera, fully cooled down to -10, etc. And these things were on. So I was a bit concerned about that because I'd done the firmware upgrade and I actually sent an email to Svbony. Now, the next day I hadn't had an answer back, and obviously it was a bit quick, but it was interesting. I restarted the whole thing again just to have a check, and suddenly these readings were correct. So bear in mind that if you do the firmware upgrade and some of these things correct, you might have to stop it and restart it again to get everything working correctly. So just bear that in mind. So in the advanced sequencer, this is my basic sequence start and end, called it that obz, that will load in automatically when I go to the advanced sequencer. These are the instructions that will go through when it's setting up the beginning of a sequence. These are my basic sequence ends instructions at the end of the night. And then, although this is Spain instruction set because I grabbed it from the Spain thing, this is just the place where I put my targets. So I'll just grab a target like NGC 55 and drag it into here. The idea being that as you're going through the night, as soon as you hit to astronomical dawn, plus 10 minutes, so 4:38, it will then automatically go straight to running the basic sequence end instructions. Now, in the basic sequence end instructions, I have my usual where I want to send a telegram message saying I'm doing that. I want the telescope to go to home, and then I want to close the dome and then start warming the camera. Now, once that is done, I want the camera to then be switched off. So once it's warmed the camera, the next instruction, so if you go into your instruction sets and you run down to the ones for switch, there's set switch values. You just drag one across here and put it in there. And then in your drop down, when you jump down here, you'll see various things, loaded in because I actually put in the focus of the rotator and the ASI 2600. So I just choose ASI 2600. I want the value to be 0, which means turning it off, and that will work. And then I've chosen again heat strip 1 and heat strip 2, and I've asked those to go to 0, which means they will be turned off as well. And that way we won't have any power going to them at all, which is how I want everything. And then I tell it to disconnect all the equipment and then can send a message saying that everything is disconnected. So that's how I've put that in because it knows that I've got a switch connected. And when you drag that set switch value across here, it knows to access that information from the switch. All right, well, what are my final thoughts on the SV241pro? Well, look, I can only tell you about 2 nights usage, so I can't tell you anything about longevity. I know there are a few videos out there of people complaining about their Pegasus Powerbox Advances having problems, and certainly one of my boxes is having a problem. It's got a USB port out and potentially has a problem with one of the power outputs. The other Pegasus Powerbox Advance is working fine, but this one does have a few problems. But bear in mind, I've had that on there for quite a few years and it's been exposed to the elements and been running quite a lot. So I guess time will tell whether the SV241pro will last the distance. I certainly hope it will, but we're not going to know that because it's a new product on the market. So, fingers crossed. But for the 2 nights I've used it, it's done exactly what it's supposed to. Apart from the little hiccup at the beginning where I need to do a firmware upgrade to get those readings correct, and as it turned out, a couple of restarts to get everything reading correctly. Bear in mind that might be definitely an issue because I know when I looked at Ben's video, he's Cosmos Estro, and I'll put a link to his video. About 3 weeks ago, he got one of those devices, and although from his video I could see things like the voltage and the power and the humidity, etc., all look to be reading within range of where they could be, he had a problem with heating of his rig, and that was because the lens temperature reading was minus 127 degrees, which was clearly a problem. And when he restarted everything the next day, it had corrected itself. So it's not isolated to me by the look of things. It's sometimes a couple of restarts are required before everything's reading correctly. I really like the fact that I can turn off and on the USB ports. Admittedly, it's in groups, but at least I can do that. I have found that with the unit in Spain, occasionally I've had to turn a USB port on and off to get something functioning. Now, admittedly, that's the Pegasus, I think it's Ultimate Powerbox 3, where you can do individual USB ports, but that's more than twice the price of the SV241pro. So you can't expect to have every luxury present, I think, when you are getting a device at a really good price point. So I'm more than happy with the fact that I can turn off USB ports, even if it's in two groups. Sure, I may need to turn a few things off when I only want one to go on and off, but that's fine. I certainly have control over all the power outputs individually, and I think that's really good. And I like to be able to turn my 2600 power on at the beginning of a session, and I like to have Nina turn it off at the end of the session, and certainly that seems to be working fine. So so far, very happy with the SV241pro, and I think it's been a great addition to my observatory. Now, I hope this video has been useful. I'm sorry it's been a little bit long, but I did want to run through all the aspects about the device, setting up the software, the problem I had with the readings and therefore requiring a firmware upgrade, and how that got corrected and required a couple of restarts, and then how I integrated that into Nina. Now, I will put a link in the description below to purchase the SV241pro from Svbony. This is the first time I've had an affiliate link, so my understanding is that I might get a little bit of money for the channel if you buy the item through the affiliate link, but it's at no extra cost to you. So yeah. Anyway, look, I hope this video has been useful, and until next time, I hope you get lots and lots of clear skies.